We hear a lot of perspectives on the Mankind podcast. Inclusion of a guest is not an endorsement of their views, and the opinions expressed here do not always represent the mission or values of the Mankind Project USA.
This is Dene Maria Sebastiana, and you're listening to the Mankind podcast. Welcome. It's not that men don't feel. Men feel greatly. Men have never been programmed and conditioned to allow emotionality. We've been programmed and conditioned, just like you stated, no weakness, no emotionality, no tears, only anger and power. And we have to hide everything else. And I think that is what made intrinsically at this point in time, men weak. Men have been void of the ability to teach the more sensitive side of us because it doesn't meet the criteria of success that dominates the planet at this point in time.
Looks like the rain has gone.
G'day guys, Brandon Clift here from the Mankind Project, and I'd like to welcome you to another episode of the Mankind Podcast, the show where we break the molds of modern manhood to prove to you that there is more than just one way to be a man. It is a commonly held belief that men are unfeeling, that they're emotionally illiterate, that women are the feelers, men are the doers. But as we progress as a society, as we progress as human beings, it's becoming more and more evident, and a lot more conversations are being had right now about the importance of men getting to better understand the role that emotions play in their lives. I know growing up for me, the unspoken rules on the playground were, don't show emotions, don't show your weaknesses, be strong, be powerful. Anger is okay, sadness is not. Throw a fist before you shed a tear. And these beliefs that I adopted from a young age, I brought into my early adulthood. And it happens the same for a lot of men, regardless of the country they're born in or the culture. And so to further discuss this, understanding how emotions play a role in our lives as men for all people, I wanted to bring in a giant in the space of not just his work with the Mankind Project, but also just his work in just better understanding healthy manhood in kind of the conscious space. Dene Maria Sebastiana, he has been deemed the Yoda of the Mankind Project by many, including me. He's played a huge role in changing the lives of thousands of men over the past couple decades. He's had a huge impact on my life. And I would like to introduce him to all of you today to share his wisdom on the importance of emotional intelligence and our ability to communicate them. So Dene, thanks for being here, mate. Tell us, who are you?
My operating mission statement right now is I'm a rigorous space of awakening inquiry that came over many years of doing this work. I grew up on the streets of New York in the 50s. My first initiation was into a street gang at 9. Of course, it was all the things that the current man box espouses about power and control and not being vulnerable and not crying. And I learned all those things really well. But my life took a different turn. I have a magnetic center that was called to the esoteric and the magical world. I've always had a tender heart, loving and caring. So I've had to find a way to channel the fierceness that I learned in a homophobic, old masculine way of becoming a man on the street, the fierceness that need to engender, and the tenderness that was, in my very nature. So my life has been an ongoing endeavor and body of work to embrace both the fierce qualities of my masculine and the tender qualities of my feminine and bring them into some kind of harmonic balance with each other. Uh, I've been married for 33 years. My marriage has certainly given me that opportunity to learn how to dance on both sides of that equation. And the book that I'm currently writing is titled Fierce and Tender.
I know you and your beautiful wife had a chance to stay with you guys a couple months ago. It was great to connect with you guys and the kitty cat. But also you just shared with me before we went live that you guys just came out of having COVID, hit you guys pretty hard, but coming out the other end feeling strong. Tell me, how are you feeling right now? And
we're in that age range where we're in the target for COVID. We're elderly. I hate using that word, elderly. We're elders, and we thought, arrogantly so, that we were pretty immune to it because our bodies are healthy and our immune system is strong. But my wife went off to Utah to visit a friend, and her friend's mother had not spoken that she was feeling sick. So Mignon brought the virus home, and a few days later, I became symptomatic, and we were down pretty much the whole month of December. There were many days where I didn't have the strength to get out of bed to take a piss. That's how hard it hit the body. I never felt in danger, like I needed to go to a hospital, or it didn't hit me that hard in the lungs. So I never felt at risk physically. What I did notice is that the virus, any invader in the body, the virus in particular, attacks not only the physical body and the cells, tissues, and organs of the body. It attacks the mental body, it attacks the emotional body, and it attacks the spiritual body. And I think we live in all four of those. The PIES is a lovely acronym for that: physical, intellectual, emotional, and spiritual. I have cultivated a literacy and a self-awareness and a body-centered awareness that I could see that this virus was impacting the way I was thinking. I could only think negatively. I had a negative attitude towards the politics that were going on, towards this virus, towards all the shit that we have to deal with on a day in, day out basis. I noticed my emotional body was impacted. All I could feel was anger, sadness, exhaustion. I had nothing positive that I could feel or express. I was pretty much depressed. And my spiritual body, I had zero practice. I had zero faith in, the above world or the below world. I was just so disconnected and absorbed in the shutdown of my body across all the dimensions. And in learning that, in going through that, this is what I learned: that what I believe is what happens to my life. I'm reading a book currently called The Biology of Belief by Bruce Lipton. It says what we believe impacts how we feel and how our life goes. We talk about doing affirmations on our men's work. Affirmations are essential for us to change our lives. We cannot change our emotional body because it operates too fast. We cannot change our instinctive body because it operates too fast. The only thing we can change is how we think about things. So being able to recognize that when I'm in the throes of some negative emotion, I can't get rid of that emotion. I can't get rid of my sadness. I have to feel through that, but I have to go back to what are the beliefs and attitudes and values that I'm carrying that lead to my experience and the emotional impact of having that experience. So bottom line here is, in order to change my life, in any appreciable, sustainable way, I've got to be mindful of what I'm thinking and be mindful of what I'm feeling.
Mm.
And that's half of what we've been taught as little boys in the crib. Men, it's not that men don't feel, men feel greatly.
Mm.
Men have never been programmed and conditioned to allow emotionality. We've been programmed and conditioned, just like you stated, no weakness, no emotionality, no tears, only anger and power. And we have to hide everything else. And I think that is what made intrinsically at this point in time men weak, because we have no literacy in our emotional body.
So let's start there, Dene. Let's kind of like dial it back to the crib. Why do you believe there is this commonly held belief that men aren't supposed to be the emotional ones, that that's up to the women in our lives, that men are unfeeling, and that we're only allowed anger? We're not allowed any of the others.
Well, it's easy to believe that men are unfeeling because we are not emotionally expressive. Why are we not emotionally expressive? That's the root of the issue. We live in a patriarchal time. There was a whole epoch of time that was ruled by the feminine, ruled by women in the matriarchal epoch. We've been in the patriarchal epoch where the masculine, the male, is the ascendant power on the planet. And that's been in process for several thousand years, where men are the ruling and dominant gender on the planet. In order for the patriarchy to function, it's always about power and control. The patriarchal message is about power and control. It wants men to be powerful and in control across the board of their lives. So it sets up a set of rules, which we've conveniently called the man box. We're not supposed to be emotional. We're not supposed to be sensitive. We're not supposed to be tender. We're not supposed to be caring. We're not supposed to be all of those feminine things, because that's not what the patriarchy deems is valuable. And we have been conditioned until recently, because my sons are in their 20s. We've taught them emotional literacy, so they're in very different relationship in the world. But it is the current consciousness and thinking, still ruled by the need for power and control, that dominates our imprinting. It gives women the right and permission to be emotionally expressive, and we call it weak. And it tells men to dominate and be in power and don't show the feminine side, which is weak. So we've been conditioned through the culture, and it's not only our American culture, it's pretty much across the world. We see the same factors that are repeating themselves again and again and again, that keep men locked into this box.
That's interesting. Speaking to the man box, it's something that for those listening that we're going to be introducing in greater depth as we interview figures like Ashanti Branch and Tony Porter, Dr. Niobe Way. These are all interviews that are coming. And yeah, like you said, the man box is these set of rules that we as boys are raised into, where we're indirectly and directly taught that, don't be a girl, don't show weakness, don't be a pussy, settle things with your fist. And so you talk about like this imprinting, it's imprinted on us, and that it's kind of the model that we have right now, with what you suggest to be like patriarchy, like this model that men are the ascendants of power. Where are we seeing this play out right now? Like, how are we seeing men's inability to communicate their feelings, to be able to express their emotions? How do we see that play out? And how have you seen that play out in your experience working with men?
Well, we don't have to look too far beyond the American political system that shows mostly the men in power When do we ever see any degree of vulnerability and accountability in the men that we elect into power? When do we ever see any vulnerability and accountability in the men that run the major corporations across the planet? They live from, act from, speak from that place of domination, power, and control. So we see the patriarchy operating full bore on the news every day.
But some people might say, well, to become president of the United States, to be the CEO of a big company, isn't that, if they've used those things to get there, isn't that a sign that those behaviors are successful, that they are good, if that's what someone's trying to achieve? Like, is that,
yes,
isn't that why this continues?
Well, the patriarchal man box has defined success as such. It doesn't define success as a man being balanced, being a good husband, a good father, not only a good provider and a good protector, but a good husband, a good father, a good teacher, a man that's balanced in all four of his quadrants, a man that has a spiritual practice, a man that teaches his sons and his children how to be tenderhearted and loving. We have been void. Men have been void of the ability to teach the more sensitive side of us, because it doesn't meet the criteria of success that dominates the planet at this point in time. It's a program.
Right. So if the data suggests that being balanced, being more in touch with feelings and emotions doesn't directly relate to the images of success that we're fed, from childhood all the way up into adulthood. So where do we begin then? That's what I'm curious about, is like, what's the starting point? If it's important that we raise boys and help invite men to see the benefits of becoming more emotionally intelligent, of being able to express their emotions, what are ways that we can start to do that? Just average Joes like me.
Well, maybe the first question is, why would we do that?
Yeah,
if you look at men's health across the planet, our life expectancy has gone down. It's significantly less than women. Our health markers are atrocious. Our suicide rates are going through the roof, even young boys. Young boys come into the world and they look for what the deep masculine looks like. They look for models of being a man that they can relate to. And who do they see? Well, the father's typically out chasing success. Maybe the boy comes from a family where the father left and they were divorced. The models for young boys and the health markers of mature masculinity are not healthy, suggesting living from the man box and chasing the traditional man box markers of success is not leading us anywhere that's healthy. So do we, at what point in time do we say, we can't live like this anymore? And that's what our men's work has been doing for the last 30 years, is we've unpacked the old warrior model, the patriarchal model of the masculine, and to see it, severely lacking, and the pain and the destruction that it causes in a man's life when he's not in touch with who he is in his core. Now we see that growing, those health numbers and suicide numbers growing. Now we can say, well, do we want to keep doing this? If we don't want to keep doing this, then we need to question the program that engenders that chase for power and success, and question whether it is valid and healthy for us to keep doing it the same way.
Yeah.
And the planet itself is in trouble. The planet is a function of the huge success of corporations, but what's been the impact on the feminine part of the earth? We've got lots of good reasons to make this change. Lots of good reasons, because our fucking life depends on it. Our individual lives and our collective lives on this planet depend on men waking up, beginning to feel into things and making decisions, not only based on their head and their cock, but based on their heart and their tenderness, being able to see and evaluate, and make a decision for the greater good and for the greater collective. That has not been happening, and it's long overdue that we begin to do that.
Yeah, it's been interesting to see that the kind of men's movement, which of course was inspired by the women's movement of the 60s, of the 70s, the bra burning, sexual liberation, the men's movement, which kind of kicked in the 80s, has moved from the fringe of our awareness into the public eye, which has been great. It's really been awesome to see that, and it doesn't show any signs of slowing down, which is phenomenal. That conversations like you and I are happening on many scales in a lot of ways. So that's at least positive to see. However, the barrier that you and I have both seen in men's work, especially for men that are just getting involved in some form of men's work or starting to have these conversations, is the barrier being that fear of losing control. Right? For me to connect with my emotions is, in essence, me losing control, letting go of control, whatever form of me having to surrender control, where control has been a huge part of my masculine upbringing. And, I can tell you right now, growing up, anger, not a problem. No trouble getting angry, because that was okay. But sadness, fear, shame, grief, things that were foreign to not just me, but a lot of my friends as well. And how can we invite the men in our lives to connect with those emotions? How can we invite them in a way that they feel okay with taking a step towards letting go of some of that control? Because, we can indict them all day for their behaviors and make us the good guys and then the bad guys. But at what point do we say, hey, wouldn't you like an opportunity to see how you could possibly do things a little different?
It would be lovely to offer up a broad-based set of ideas or programs or trainings that tell men that, how to do this. In my life and in my coaching practice, I've learned an essential truth. I only change when it hurts too much to keep doing it the same way.
Say that again.
I only change when it hurts too much to keep doing it the same way. The way we've been trained, the way we've been programmed, the way the ego operates. The ego always, the job of the ego is to protect and defend against pain and discomfort. And it does a great job of that. And it finds all kinds of reasons to say no to healthy things because it's uncomfortable. And as long as the ego, and the ego is the dominant element in our mental apparatus that engenders the choices that we make, we have nothing else other than the ego, because the ego is always about power and control. As long as the ego is in charge, it's going to protect and defend against pain and discomfort at all costs. And in order to become emotionally literate and open to our emotional body, which is contra to the program that we've been given, it's going to be uncomfortable. So many men over the years that I've been doing these trainings in men's work, men come in when they're desperate.
Yeah.
Men come in when they have no place else to go and their ego program no longer works. They only change when it hurts too much to keep doing it the same way.
Yeah.
So I don't know how to speed up this process,
Yeah.
Brendan. I really don't. You know, I'm writing this book. I'm in the middle of writing this book, and it's pretty much about, you know, this conversation that we're having. There are a lot of self-help books out there. Women are talking to their men, and men are not listening. I'm not, you know, making women, putting them on a pedestal. There are a lot of women that are not emotionally literate either. They've been given more permission to have their feelings and express their feelings, but they don't necessarily are more emotionally literate. So I'm not casting any blame or fault on either one of the genders. We're talking about men now. They have many, many opportunities to set aside that old man box set of values that they have and the ego that protects and defends that. Those parts of them are being challenged across the board in our lives right now. And we have many opportunities to make the shift and change. There seems to be a reaction to the men's movement, to the softening of men. There seems to be a reaction of men needing to be hard and more invulnerable. At the end of every epoch, as we, you know, in that liminal space in between the patriarchy and some kind of more balance, we're in that liminal space in between. There's a draw to move forward, and there's a compensatory draw to pull back into that. So it's very challenging these days to, to get men to buy into this. I think each man has to confront his own difficulty in his own life. There's plenty of resources.
That's the challenging part, is that space in between. I remember when I got involved in the Mankind Project, my dad got into it 14 years before I did. And so I had some exposure to some of the teachings and some of the work, but it was coming through my dad. So of course I wasn't going to listen. And so when I came in very skeptical. And then once I had been through my process and faced what I needed to face and answered a lot of questions, man, I dove into the deep end, almost, I would say too far into it. And it was this kind of rubber band experience of, contraction, extraction, and confusion as to, well, how vulnerable can I be? How much can I express my emotions? It was messy. It was uncomfortable. It was dirty. It threw a lot of relationships into question. And it was the best thing I ever did. And at no point could I, with full confidence, tell you exactly what was going on. At no point could I tell you or articulate with clear conscience and confidence of, this is what is actually happening in my life. Because it was like standing in the arena. The second I deal a blow, I've just copped two in return. I'm knocked out of the arena. I have to choose to get back in. It's one of the scariest things I've ever done. It continues to be some of the scariest work I've ever been a part of. I liken it to when I went to Peru and into the Amazon to do ayahuasca. I felt like I had to die multiple times to come back a different person. And it's freaking hard. It's painful. It's gross. But it's also, hands down, the most rewarding thing I've ever done in my life. And I see that time and time with men I know and women who choose to take on these and ask these uncomfortable questions. God, I feel like my guts right now as I'm talking. These uncomfortable questions that are inside of us, these truths that we may not want to accept. I've seen it time and time again where I see that man who knows they're not supposed to be in the relationship they're in. They're married 20 years. They've got 3 kids. 2 of them are still in middle school. And that man has that penny drop moment. And he goes, I need to leave my wife. Or vice versa. Or I need to fight for my relationship. And those truths weren't going to come any other way than if it was the questions are being asked. I'm going around in circles just to say, this is possibly some of the scariest work I think someone can do in their life. regardless of their background, regardless of their experiences. And so from my point of view and from my experience, I feel like I can both sympathize and empathize with the man who looks at the mountain that is emotion standing at the bottom going, how the am I going to get up there? How on earth, when I was raised in an environment, in a community, by a father, by a mother, by a grandfather, by educators that taught me not to be emotional, that in order to survive in my hood, at my school, in my college football team, the only way I could survive was to live the way of the man box. Don't show feelings, don't feel emotions, be heterosexual. Anything homosexual is bad and weak. Anything female is weak. And so, yeah, like it's freaking scary. It's confusing. There's not a lot of black and white. So, yeah, I mean, if you're a man out there right now listening to this and you have that hesitation, you're not alone, man. You are not alone.
I think making the change is easier than deciding to make the change. It's letting go of one belief and falling into that liminal space where we suspend that belief and because we realize that holding on to this belief about the way men should be, it hurts too much. And like I said before, we have to hurt a little in the current box that we're in, because we realize that maybe we're beginning to outgrow it. Maybe it doesn't have the luster that it promises in the media or in our common culture.
Sure.
Maybe success has a price to pay that hurts us, that hurts our relationship, that hurts our children. And the hurt is all over the place. Alcohol rates are up, particularly in this lockdown time. Alcohol rates are up, drug use rates are up, suicide rates are up.
Domestic
violence rates are up. Putting on weight is up. All the unhealthy markers in this lockdown, we've had to, the gift of COVID is we're now home in this box, and we got to fucking look at ourselves. And we don't like what we see.
No.
Only from that place, when we realize that the choices that I've been making, and of course you can blame it on COVID, but COVID's been a gift, I think, because it's given us an opportunity to truly awaken to many things that we have not seen before, not the least of which is how much we need each other. That's another thing about this man box, particularly an American man box. We talk about rugged individualism that no longer works. Coming to an awakening that my life isn't quite going the way they told me it would if I only followed the rules. Suddenly you realize that the rules are, not designed for you to succeed. It's designed to keep you inside a box. Once you come to that realization and you say, I need to change some things, the resources are abundant.
Yeah.
With our project,
it's just that choice. It's just the decision is harder than actually making the changes.
Exactly. The decision,
to pick up the book.
Yes. To pick up the book,
show.
To call up a coach, to go to do a training, to join a men's circle, to challenge the old beliefs that we lived inside that man box for so long. And it's so hard. It really is hard. Transformational change is really hard. Over the years, the project has had an ongoing affirmation that we change the world one man at a time. And we look around now, and I heard Deepak Chopra said, if 1 billion people would meditate, that 100th monkey piece would shift consciousness on the planet. I don't know that that's true. And I don't know that we have the luxury to wait to change one man at a time. We need to get men into circles. We need to make this work available to men. We need to keep putting our materials and our broadcasts and our books out there to give men the continuing opportunity to pick up a resource when they're ready to make the change, and only when they're ready to make the change.
Yeah. And as Niobe Way says, we need to normalize the conversation around connection. We need to make it something that isn't taboo for men.
And maybe this COVID has shown us, we were able to shift fairly easily from our in-person groups to online groups. After the first month or two, I got tired of looking at, Zoom's Hollywood Squares. I realized I miss being with men and bumping up against men's bodies and having, the gritty, soulful conversations that happen inside our circles. It wasn't the same in the electronic world as it is in the physical world, when we see each other, we feel each other, we read each other's bodies, and we've made a circle safe enough for men to bring their questions, to bring their uncertainties, to bring their fears. They're so welcome in our circles. Our circles are safe for men to come and explore their lives. Is their life working in a way that's functional for them, or do they need to make a change? How do they go about making a change? That's why I think our circles are so essential and important for the advancement of this work.
Couldn't agree more. And so we've pretty much covered most of what I was looking to learn from you, Dene. I love that you're a straight shooter. I love that you lay it down the line. You've been a great mentor for me and for so many others. In fact, you've helped me through one of the most difficult transitions of my life. So to have you here and share the space with me and the audience, it's been beautiful, mate. It really has. I want to ask you, what is your greatest hope for the next generations to come?
For the last year and during the lockdown, I've had a lot of time to think and ponder and assess, not only my life and men's work, but, the whole collective on this planet. And I realized how very little I am able to control. The only thing that I can control is what is immediately in front of me and what's inside of me. Anything beyond that is a reach. My hope is that through these broadcasts, through the conversations that men are having across the globe, through women, and particularly the Me Too movement, bless their heart that they finally had the courage and the strength to put out there what was really happening underneath the surface of things. I'm grateful that men are waking up and questioning themselves, questioning their values and beliefs and behaviors, questioning their health and well-being. My hope is that the work that we put out there, these podcasts, the book that I'm reading, the opportunities to connect in circles that are becoming larger and larger, certainly in the US. My hope is that at some point in time, enough men wake up, like enough humans meditate, enough men wake the fuck up and make the shift, because it only can happen when one heart light at a time turns on. I don't think there's a collective medicine that we can take and suddenly make that shift. My hope and my prayer is that enough men over time begin to make this shift before we blow ourselves to kingdom come on this planet. And we certainly have that capacity. Before that happens, the illumination inside men's hearts wakes up and we make the change. I've often said, I don't know if I'm ever going to get to see that promised land. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. Regardless of whether I am able to see that, I know that my sons will carry that forth in their lives, and I remain hopeful. Thank you.
This has been the Mankind Podcast, produced in association with the Mankind Project USA. I have been your host, Brandon Clift, and I personally want to thank our guests for joining us today and imparting their wisdom from their experiences in this amazing journey called life. And of course, I want to thank you, the listener, because through your attention and your support, you make it a heck of a lot easier for us to let men out there in the world know that they are not alone and that there is more than one way to be a man. Special thanks, of course, goes to my incredible team, Marketing and Communications Director Boyson Hodgson, producer and editor of this episode, Michael Russo, who makes me sound so much more intelligent than I actually am, so of course, special kudos goes there. And if you've been enjoying the music throughout this episode and all of our episodes, check out Jim, Donovan, and the Sun King Warriors. I have links to them in the show notes. Now, the fee for this episode is simple. If you found gold and insights that you believe could benefit your loved ones and those you care about, be sure to share it with them. And of course, remember that life doesn't happen to us, it happens for us, so long as we rip the pen out of fate's hand and become the author of our own story. So my friend, pick up the pen and we'll see you next week. Lots of love.